Between the moment a buyer first becomes aware of you and the moment they actually trust you enough to actually buy, there's a gap. A wide, often invisible gap that most businesses never manage to bridge. They generate awareness, they generate interest, and then the prospect just stalls, never converting, and the business never understood why. The reason is almost always the same: an unbridged trust gap. This is one piece of a bigger framework that I call the conversion ecosystem. And my goal is to use this system to help you become the most visible, the most valuable, and the most trusted business in your market. So, if that interests you, keep watching. The trust gap is the distance between awareness and the trust required to act. Bridging it is the hidden work that decides whether your awareness ever turns into customers. If you run a business, especially as a founder or a professional service, you're almost certainly losing prospects to this exact gap right now. And you're probably blaming your pricing or your leads instead of the real cause. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll show you exactly what the trust gap is and why awareness alone never bridges it. I'll show you why so many businesses fall into it without realizing, and how to build the bridge that carries a prospect from merely aware to ready to buy. I spent 27 years in B2B marketing. The businesses that convert the most were almost never the ones with the most awareness. They were the ones who built an actual bridge instead of hoping awareness would be enough. Let's define the trust gap clearly, because clarity reveals the problem. On one side is awareness. The buyer knows that you exist. On the other side is the trust required to buy. The buyer believes in you enough to commit their money and take the risk in choosing you. The trust gap is the distance between those two states and is almost much wider than the business assumes. Here's the mistake nearly everyone makes. They treat awareness and trust as if they were close together, as if making someone aware of you puts them most of the way towards buying. So they pour most of their effort in generating awareness, assuming it will naturally turn into sales. But awareness is just the starting line. Between being aware of you and trusting you enough to buy lies a huge stretch of trust building that awareness alone does nothing to cross. Think about the gap in terms of what the buyer needs to believe. To go from aware and ready to buy, a buyer has to move through several states. From knowing you exist, to believing that you're credible, to believing that you could solve their specific problem, to believing that you won't let them down, to feeling safe enough to commit. Each of those is a step across a trust gap. The awareness only gets them to the very first one. The rest of the gap remains, and it's a bigger part. This is why awareness without trust building produces so little. You can make a huge number of people aware of you, and if you never build the trust gap, almost none of them will buy. Awareness left them stranded at the starting line. With the whole gap still ahead of them, the awareness was real, but was never converted, because nothing carried those aware prospects across the gap to the trust required to act. So the trust gap is the often invisible distance between awareness and purchase-ready trust. The distance awareness alone can't cross. Recognizing this gap exists and that it's wide is the first step, because most businesses don't even know it's there. They keep generating awareness and wondering why it doesn't convert, never realizing that there's an entire gap between awareness and conversion that they never built a bridge across. Let's look at why awareness, no matter how much of it you generate, can never bridge the trust gap on its own. This matters because so many businesses keep pouring resources into more awareness, expecting it to eventually convert. More awareness simply can't do the job the gap requires. The reason is that awareness and trust are different things built by different means. Awareness is built by being seen. Trust is built by being known and proven over time. Seeing you more often makes a buyer more aware, but awareness alone doesn't make them believe that you're credible, capable, and safe. Those beliefs need something awareness does not provide: repeated demonstration of value, proof of capability, and trust built up over time. More awareness gives you more of the wrong thing for crossing that gap. That's the same trap behind what I call the familiarity advantage. Being seen builds recognition, but it takes something more deliberate to turn that recognition into trust. This is why simply increasing your reach or visibility, while valuable for getting into the radar, does not solve a conversion problem. If your prospects are aware but not converting, generating even more awareness just produces more aware but not converting prospects. You're widening the top of the gap without building any bridge across it. The problem was never too little awareness. It's an unbridged gap, and awareness is not the material a bridge is made of. There's a deeper reason too. The trust gap is really about risk and belief, not recognition. To cross it, a buyer has to get past their skepticism and their fear of making a mistake. And from there, they need to build genuine belief that you're the right, safe choice. Awareness does nothing to address risk or build belief. It only addresses recognition. So, no amount of recognition closes a gap that's really about overcoming risk and building belief. Different problem, different solution. So the hard truth is that awareness, no matter how much you generate, leaves a trust gap exactly as wide as before. It gets prospects to the edge of the gap, but no further. To carry them across, you need something entirely different from awareness. A deliberate process of building trust over time, showing your value, proving your capability, and lowering the felt risk of choosing you. Until you build that bridge, all your awareness will keep stranding prospects at the edge of the gap they never cross. Let's look at how businesses fall into the trust gap, because the pattern is so common and so misread. It usually looks like this. A business successfully generates awareness and even interest. Prospects discover them, engage a little, maybe inquire. And then the prospect goes quiet. They stall, they don't convert, they don't even say no. They just drift away. The business is left puzzled with interested prospects who somehow never become customers. What's actually happening is that prospects hit the trust gap and they had no way across it. They became aware and mildly interested, which carried them to the edge of the gap, but the trust required to actually buy wasn't there yet. And the business did nothing to build it. So the prospect stalled at the edge, unable to cross, and eventually drifted away. They didn't reject the business. They simply never built enough trust to commit, and nothing helped them get there. The business almost always misreads this. They see prospects going quiet, and they decide the leads weren't serious, or the market was weak, or their pricing is wrong. They blame the prospects or outside factors, never seeing that the prospects were genuinely interested but stranded at an unbridged trust gap. So what do businesses do? They respond by generating more awareness or cutting prices, neither of which bridges the gap. And the pattern repeats. More interested prospects stalling and drifting away for the same unrecognized reason. This misreading is incredibly costly because it means the businesses keep solving the wrong problem. They have a trust problem, but they treat it as an awareness problem or a pricing problem. So they keep pouring resources into solutions that can't work. Meanwhile, the real issue, the unbridged trust gap, goes unaddressed. The steady stream of interested but stalling prospects continues, each one a customer they could have won if they built the bridge. And here's the especially painful part. These stalled prospects are not lost causes. They are nearly customers who simply needed help across the gap. They were interested enough to engage, and with a bridge across the trust gap, many of them would have converted. So falling into the gap is not just a missed awareness problem. It is the repeated loss of prospects who were genuinely close to buying, stranded for a lack of trust-building bridge the business never knew they needed to build. Catching prospects right here is exactly what the conversion ecosystem is built to do. So, how do you bridge the trust gap? You build a bridge out of deliberate trust building, carried over time that carries prospects from awareness all the way to the trust required to buy. This bridge isn't a single thing, it's a process. A series of stages that gradually build trust a prospect needs to cross. Let me describe the bridge you need to build. The bridge begins where awareness ends, by establishing credibility. Once a prospect is aware of you, the first span of the bridge convinces them that you're legitimate and competent through real expertise and professionalism. This moves them from merely aware to taking you seriously. Without this first span, the prospect can't even begin to cross because there's no basis for the deeper trust to follow. The next span builds belief in your capability for their specific problem. General credibility is not enough. This prospect needs to believe you can solve their particular situation. This span is built with relevant proof, case studies, and content that speaks directly to their problem, moving them from you seem competent to you can help me specifically. This is where many bridges are incomplete, leaving prospects who respect you but are not convinced that you're right for them. The next span lowers the felt risk by choosing you, addressing the fear of making a mistake. Even a prospect who believes you could help still hesitate because commitment feels risky. This span uses proof, guarantees, reassurance, and built up trust to make choosing you feel safer rather than risky, moving them from you can help to it's safe to commit with you. This is often the final decisive span because it's the last thing standing between an interested prospect and a purchase is usually the fear of getting it wrong. And the whole bridge is built over time through repeated contact because trust builds up rather than appearing all at once. You can't build a bridge with all these spans in a single interaction. Build them through steady, valuable presence that gradually establishes credibility, proves capability, and lowers risk. This carries a prospect across the gap step by step. The bridge is built span by span over time, which is why bridging the trust gap is really a process of sustained trust building, not a single persuasive moment. This is compounding trust at work, flat and unremarkable at first until enough spans are built that the whole bridge finally holds its weight. There is a practical reality about bridging the trust gap we have to address. Prospects cross at their own pace, and they may need to be actively kept on the bridge, or they drift off. This is where the discipline of nurturing comes in. The ongoing process of staying present with a prospect and continuing to build trust until they're ready to cross all the way. I call this system momentum mail. And the whole job is exactly this, keeping prospects moving instead of letting them drift away. Without it, a well-built bridge gets abandoned mid-crossing. Here's the issue. A prospect rarely crosses the entire trust gap in one sitting. They build some trust, then go quiet. They maybe return, crossing a gap gradually, often over a long stretch of time. If, during the gaps in the contact, you disappear, the prospect stalls on the bridge and eventually drifts away, losing the trust momentum that they have built. Most prospects who fail to convert don't consciously reject you. They simply drift off the bridge because nothing kept them moving across it. Nurturing solves this by staying present and continuing to build the trust through the prospect's crossing, however long it takes. It is the steady, ongoing communication full of genuine value that keeps you present in the prospect's world and keeps the trust building between their active moments. Nurturing keeps prospects on the bridge, moving across, rather than letting them drift off into the gap. It's the mechanism that carries a prospect through a long, gradual crossing to the other side. This reframes what nurturing is for. It's not pestering prospects to buy, it's keeping them company on the bridge across the trust gap, continuing to build the trust they need patiently until they're ready to cross all the way. Done well, nurturing feels like helpfulness, not pressure, because it's genuinely continuing to provide value and build trust, which is exactly what carries the prospect across the gap. The prospects you nurture are the ones who make it across. The ones that you abandon are the ones who drift away. And this is why nurturing is so valuable and so neglected. Most businesses build a little bridge and get prospects part way across and then they abandon them, losing prospects who were genuinely on their way to becoming customers. The businesses that nurture, that stay present, and keep building trust through the crossing convert far more of their aware prospects because they keep them on the bridge until they reach the other side. Bridging the trust gap is not just about building the bridge, it's about keeping prospects on it through the nurturing until they cross. Let me close this teaching by showing why the trust gap changes economics of your entire business. Once you build the bridge, everything else you do becomes far more valuable. The trust gap is the bottleneck between all your awareness efforts and actual revenue, and bridging it unlocks the value that was previously stranded. Think about what bridging the trust gap actually does for your awareness. Right now, if you have an unbridged trust gap, all the awareness you generate is largely wasted because aware prospects stall at the edge and then drift away. Build a bridge and the same awareness suddenly converts because now aware prospects have a way to cross to purchase-ready trust. You don't necessarily need more awareness. You need to convert the awareness you already have, and the bridge is what converts it. Bridging the gap multiplies the value of your existing awareness efforts. It also changes how you should invest. A business that recognizes a trust gap stops pouring everything into generating more awareness. It starts by investing in the trust building and nurturing that convert awareness into customers. This is usually a far better investment. Most businesses have plenty of awareness leaking into an unbridged gap, and building the bridge captures the leaking value rather than generating more value to leak. The highest leverage investment is often the bridge, not more awareness. And bridging the gap compounds with everything else in your marketing. Your visibility generates awareness. The bridge converts it into trust, and the trust converts it into customers. Each part finally connects to the other, so value flows all the way through instead of getting stranded at the gap. The trust gap is often the broken connection that stops a marketing system from working as a whole. Bridging it is what lets the whole system finally function, with awareness flowing through trust and revenue. So, bridging the trust gap is not a minor improvement. It's often a single change that makes everything else pay off. It converts your stranded awareness, redirects your investment towards a real bottleneck, and connects your marketing into a system where value flows all the way to revenue. Recognize the gap, build the bridge of deliberate trust building, and keep prospects on it through nurturing. Then, watch the awareness you are already generating finally turn into customers. Here's everything in one breath. The trust gap is a wide, often invisible distance between a buyer being aware of you and trusting you enough to buy. Awareness alone could never cross it, because awareness is built by being seen. Trust is built by being proven over time. Businesses fall into the gap when prospects become aware and interested and then stall and drift away. And the business misreads it as weak leads or pricing rather than an unbridged gap. You bridge it by building trust deliberately over time. You establish credibility, prove capability for your prospect-specific problem, and lower the felt risk by choosing you span by span. And because prospects cross at their own pace, you need to keep them on the bridge through nurturing. Steady, valuable presence that carries them across rather than letting them drift away. Bridging the gap changes everything. It converts the awareness you already generate, it redirects your investment to your real bottleneck, and it connects your marketing into a system where value flows all the way to revenue. So stop pouring effort into awareness that strands people at the edge. Build the bridge across the trust gap, keep prospects on through nurturing, and turn your aware prospects into customers they were always capable of becoming. This idea is one piece of something bigger I call the conversion ecosystem. If this video changed how you see your own marketing, make sure you watch this next one. Remember, the most visible, the most valuable, the most trusted business in your market wins. The whole point of the conversion ecosystem is to help you build a system that makes you all three.